So welcome back to another show of The Money Honey, and today you are with me. That's right, I'm going solo today because I want to share with you my money story, my own money story. So let me put myself in the hot seat about what I do with money, my money mindset, where did it come from, my money habits. So I wanted to share that with you just to open up that dialogue within yourself as well. Maybe you can relate to some of the things that I'm saying. Maybe you do things differently. Maybe you've even got some wisdom and top tips to share with me based on what it is that I'm saying. But I really want to use this conversation as a way to help you connect with your own money story and your own money habits, just to explore why you do what you do, why you think the way you think. So if you're with me, stay tuned, follow me for the rest of this conversation. We're going to be together for about half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour to discuss our money habits and our spending habits. Because let's face it, a lot of us either know how to make a lot of money, but don't know how to save it, invest it, or spend it. Or actually, we might have limiting beliefs around money and we struggle to make a lot of it because we actually don't allow money to flow freely into our lives, right? So wherever you are, whatever your journey with money has been, this is my one. And I hope that you can learn something from it, or even just open up something within yourself just from hearing me speak about it. As always, I'm really, really grateful, just before we dive in, to say that this show was born by complete accident. I definitely just went for it. Like, that's the only way I can explain it. And I'm just so grateful for everybody who has been on the show, for people who have been sharing the show, people who have also been recommending speakers for the show. Like, I totally appreciate each and every one of you. The listeners as well who have left a review, who have starred the show, who have just messaged me maybe on a random day just to let me know which speaker really spoke to them on that particular day. So I often say that I am here and I show up on a daily basis, on a weekly basis for you, because it could just be one speaker on that day that really needed to hear what one of the speakers had to say or what I had to say. And we're here to just basically share our knowledge and share our experience, but also it's about you. It's about you listening and what you get out of it and what impact this is making. So thank you to everybody who has reached out and thanked me for putting the show on. I couldn't do it without, like I said, the speakers and without people recommending other speakers. So I really, really, really appreciate it. We're nearly a year old with the podcast. So it'll be a year in December. I know it feels really, really far away, but we started on a just so random. Someone just tagged me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Roz, there's not a podcast out there for women in finance. Like, can't you do something about it?" And I was like, yeah, okay, as if I didn't have enough on my plate. And I was like, yeah, why not? Let's just do it. So thank you so much for making this happen. I really, really appreciate it. So let's just dive into my money story. Okay, so as usual, people would start by blaming parents and saying, well, this is what my mum and dad taught me and this is how I was raised. And the reason I'm not good with money is because my parents are bad with money, right? So we usually just blame the people that raised us as to why we have it or don't have it. So I do want to take a trip down memory lane and share with you my first encounter with money, but I'm going to caveat this by saying that I don't like going down memory lane and looking at something when I was 4 years old, now that I'm 33, because that's a very long distant memory. And a lot of people try and make sense of their life today based on what they remember as a 4-year-old. Firstly, you're a completely different person, right? You're not who you were when you were 4. And you're trying to make sense of an emotion or something you learned when you were a young person at today's age. So I know that whatever I remember about money and whatever I remember about, my parents, I have to take it with a pinch of salt because I can't go back to that time and, watch a replay of what happened. So whatever it is I remember and whatever it is I'm telling you today is just an interpretation of what I remember. So here we go. My first encounter with money in the household and my first exposure to it is that the men brought the money home, right? So my mum was a stay-at-home mum. She was raising 2 children. We were in Sicily, and it was my dad going out to work. My mum didn't work. So my mum, cleaned the house, took us to school, would see relatives and family, would make lunch, would cook. So that was my mum's role in the house, right? And so my first encounter with money was that the man was the plan, right? The man was the person that brought in the money. And it is so far away from my adult reality and belief. I don't know what happened, but I must have seen that situation and thought, no, that's not how it's going to go. Like my brain must have just made that connection and that decision for me, because I don't remember thinking when I grow up, I'm going to rely on a man or I'm not, because I actually never have relied on a man. So even though my father was a provider, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm so, like, my parents were so young when they had me and my brother, like they were in their 20s, and how they held down a household, kids, jobs. My dad had his own business. Like, how did they do that? I don't know. But they did it anyway. And I'm just so proud of them. So I'm not putting judgment on my mum, who had, like, my dad supporting the family. That's just their choice. And it's very traditional, actually. It's very Sicilian of us to have that kind of dynamic in the household. But I moved to the UK quite young. So we were about 8 years old. So you'd say that a lot of my character and personality was already quite well established. I was my own little person, and I was definitely 8 going on to 18, according to the stories my family tell me. But obviously something happened, maybe a cultural shift, because I became and was very, very independent, and was very wise from a young age to know consciously that I didn't want to rely on a man. I mean, that's what my mum tells me anyway. She was very like, you're very independent. And even though you grew up seeing your father bring home the money, you actually wanted to be that provider. You actually wanted to be that self-sufficient person, even though my mum was completely happy with how that was going. So yeah, so that was my first exposure to the household money and how it was coming into the household. But then I saw a shift in my parents when we moved to the UK. My mum actually got her own full-blown career. She has absolutely smashed it. And now the household is very, as always has been, very, very equal. They both go to work. They both have been going to work. My brother and I, when we moved to the UK, we went straight to school. Our grandparents would pick us up after school. So the dynamic completely changed. Like, my mum wasn't the one cooking at home and, dropping us off at school. It was my grandparents now, because my parents were both at work. And so that also had an impact in the way I live my adult life now, is because I saw both my parents hustling. They were both out there working. But what I really learned from their experience with work and money is that my mum regained her independence. She wasn't just going to work for the money. Yeah, of course, living in England was going to be a lot more expensive than living in Sicily. So, bigger house, more expensive, school clothes, car, all that kind of stuff. But I saw her gain her own self identity and independence. And now she's an inspirational career woman. She's just absolutely amazing, and has inspired me with the things that I do today. So yeah, that was quite interesting, actually, when I was thinking about doing this show, thinking about that story and how it was always, we were relying on my father as a family to survive. And actually, when we came to the UK, I saw them both equal as going out to work and bringing home the money. So I really love that they both raised me to see that happening for them. And then I wanted to also share, kind of like, some of us have, a money habit with, either we're overspending or we're savers, right? So maybe you're listening to this, you're like, oh, I'm definitely a spender, or I'm definitely a saver. And I was like, okay, so where did that come from for me? Like, why do I save? Why do I spend? Why do I invest? And I think that comes from So I'm definitely, I don't know if you can be both, but I do like spending money, but I've always been really safe with how I do it. So what do I mean? So my parents definitely taught me, our household definitely instilled in us about having to save, like save, 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 save. And I remember just saying to my mom, but like, what saving for? You know, because I had this obviously millennial way of thinking, which was like, I want to live now. And, you know, I can't take money to the grave with me. Like, why would I want to save so much? I want to have fun now. So I did have this split mindset of, I do understand that it's sensible to save for a rainy day and save and invest. But actually, I really just want to enjoy life. I want to live in the moment. So I found a way to do both. But the way I did that was still in a very, very sensible way. So, for example, I remember my first encounter with saving and why I needed to save came from needing something and wanting to feel like I had achieved it rather than it was given to me. So one of those stories was I got a job straight away. As soon as I could work, I started working. So I think my first job was at the age of 14. I was working in a salon, a hairdresser's, you know, sweeping hair and washing hair and, you know, cleaning the salon. And I think at the time I was earning something like £10 a week. Then it turned to 15, then it turned to 20. And I was like, oh my God, I am so rich. Because I was still very, very young. And obviously I didn't need to pay for bills and, you know, actually buy food and stuff in the house. All the pocket money, if you like, all the work money that I was earning was just going into a pot. So it was very, very easy to save when I was little because all the necessities were taken care of, even holidays when we used to go on holidays as a family. But actually all the money I was earning was going into a pot. And my parents used to always say to me, they were like, we will cover everything whilst you're under our roof. You are our children. You don't need to pay rent. That's another conversation because I know now English families do it quite differently to Italian families. You know, Italian kids, you're classed as a child and forever. Like you know, there are 40-year-olds that live at home and still, you know, under the care of mom and dad in terms of like financially. Because yeah, that's another story. Like typically Italian parents do not like ask for rent from their children and things like that. So it was very, very easy for us to save, but our parents wanted us to learn how to work and go out there to work, but save our own money. So I remember my first encounter with saving because I had a goal. And I had a very, very important goal. And that was I wanted to go to university and I wanted to buy my own laptop. So I'd never owned a laptop. My parents had bought the household computer back then. And I remember obviously having to go to uni and I wanted to have my own portable laptop. So from my part-time jobs, you know, once I got to a certain age, I started, you know, working like cafe and stuff like that, not just in the salon. So I was juggling maybe around 2 jobs, like working evenings as well. And all that money was just going toward the laptop. And then one day I saved up enough money to get myself, I remember like the really heavy Dell laptops, and mine had like this like soft pink furnishing, like casing over the top of it. And I was like, that's it. I think it must have cost me, I don't know, maybe like £500, £600 at the time, something like that. I can't remember. But I was like, I'm so excited for this. And I remember my parents saying, Roz, you're going to uni. This is part of your education. We'll pay for a laptop. We'll buy you a laptop. And I was like, no, I want to have this self-worth that I earned it, I worked for it, and I want to do it. So yeah, that was my first encounter with saving, and it felt good because I worked really, really hard and I bought a laptop. And then it happened again when I needed to go to, once I finished uni, again at university, I was juggling like 4 jobs. And that wasn't just because I needed the extra money at uni, which really came in handy, guys, because I just loved having money that I didn't need to scrounge around. Like, what do I mean? Like, for example, I loved being able to have enough money that I could get a taxi to go out. So a lot of my friends are like, right, we've got to leave half an hour early because the club is 25 minutes away. I was like, well, I don't want to walk 25 minutes. Like, I'll just get a taxi and I'll meet you there. Or I'll get a taxi, guys. And I'd often be the one offering to get a taxi and be like, look, let's just leave 5 minutes before we need to go and I'll just get a taxi. I loved that kind of independence. I didn't have to worry about like, oh yeah, but that's going to cost £2. Like, when you split the bill and everyone's like, oh, but I didn't have a Coke. So instead of paying £2.50, can I pay £2? It's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I just wanted to be like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, I just wanted to have a good time. So I juggled enough jobs where I could live quite comfortably at university, but also save. So I wanted to go out with friends. I wanted to go out to London a lot. And not just to like the local pub. I wanted to actually go to nice places and explore things. And I also liked going shopping. I loved my H&M student discount and, stuff like that. So again, I was living in the moment because I had this split mindset, as I said before, about being a millennial and being, trying to live now and really enjoy myself now versus saving for the future. So I wanted to satisfy like my parents, be like, look, I'm saving. I know I'm going out a lot, but look how much I'm saving. I'm still saving. So when I graduated from university, the next big thing that I bought, so remember I bought the laptop to get to university, but then the next big thing that I bought was a car. So I passed my driving test, and that sense of independence was immense. Like I was so excited to have a lump sum of money. I remember that it's somewhere between like £3,000 to £4,000. And as I mentioned before, I used to spend quite sensibly. So what I mean by that is, with £3,000-4,000 in my bank account, I saw that as an opportunity to buy a car. But I could have, for example, bought a car on finance, have a new flashy car, only spend £200, £250 a month to have a flashy car, but then spend the rest of the money on something else. Instead, I chose to not put myself in debt with credit. And I just said, look, do you know what? I just want a really nice, cute little car. I don't need like anything flashy or fancy. So my first car was a Vauxhall Tigra, a little blue car. And it was actually also convertible as well. But I bought secondhand because I just wanted to pay that lump sum of money and then just know that I didn't owe anyone any money. I was like, right, that is my car. I own it. It's mine. And so that was another really big sense of achievement that, again, my parents brought me through, because I remember going to the garage with my dad, making sure that I was making a sensible investment or a sensible decision, because obviously I didn't understand too much about cars. So I was like, right, this is the car I like the style, it's within my budget, what do you think? So we checked it out and we were like, yeah, it's totally fine, Roz, like go for it. So yeah, that was my early experience with saving and earning money. I think earning money for me has always come from working and always come from working hard. So like I said, I was juggling 4 jobs. I was, working from the age of 14. Like I always had this work ethic, like this very, very strong work ethic instilled in me. And where did it come from? Was it because I saw my dad run his own business? Or was it because I saw both my parents work really, really hard? I don't know, but that's what I did. So I worked really hard. When I say worked really hard, it's like I wasn't working necessarily smart. I just did the jobs that brought in the money. And then I got to live through that and, lived a happy life by spending the money that I was earning. So I just used to see money as a means to an end. Like, right, I've got to get a laptop. I'll just, work hard. I need to save, £300. There we go. Laptop sorted. Okay, what's the next thing I'm working towards? So at least, I set goals and, I found a way to budget to find a way to afford those things. So yeah, that was my early money and saving encounter. And then started to explore, if we dive into now my first experience with business. Okay, so where did that come from? And, why did I see, money or business as a means for money or to earn money? So my family has always been employed, but I didn't know this when I was little, but now I know, looking back, my father was actually always self-employed, but I didn't know the difference. So when I was little, I just saw my dad had a job and he used to go out to work, but actually he used to own his own business in Sicily. So I guess that business element was always in me. I just didn't know it. So growing up, I just thought my dad was employed. So I never looked at my family as entrepreneurial or business people. I looked at them as like, they're just really talented and they've got a job and they go to work, they come home and we have dinner together in the evening. So I didn't know this about my family, that we had a business, but I remember, this is super like spooky. I don't know how like a little child would know this, but yes, I used to play with Barbies and dolls and, my brother's Action Man. And I used to ride a bike outside, my little courtyard in Sicily. But I remember doing something really random, but I loved it, guys. I can't, I wish I actually do have the books, but they're still at home. So I haven't got them with me today. But I remember sitting outside, in the shade, because it's Sicily, it's hot. So I was sitting outside in the shade, and I'd have these books that, when you look at them now, they're the books that you would use in a business when you were like, write people. It was a diary. It was like a calendar, right? It was like a daily calendar. So it had like the date, the day, and it was all lined. But I used it as like my my business book, because I set up a shop. So I set up an imaginary shop, right? And I would design in this book. I don't know why this, please, because I've got nothing in my career, nothing to do with this. But I designed a clothing shop, where I would sell outfits that I designed. Like, I'm so bad at drawing, guys. Like, I don't know why as a child I thought I could start a business as a designer and start a business in fashion, because I've got nothing to do with fashion in today's world, like literally nothing. But anyway, as a child, I was like designing these outfits, and I was also adding accessories with them, because I remember thinking, right, if I sell this dress for, at the time it was lira, like 200 lira, right? And I want to make more money, I could sell the dress with shoes, a hat and gloves and a bag. So then, and if you can imagine on this page, if I can get the pictures, I'll put it onto this podcast, I promise. But yeah, I would design this outfit, and then I would draw a hat. So later I would be upselling the customer. So I'd made a plan for how to upsell a customer with more accessories. So I drew the hat, the shoes, the bag, the gloves. And then I was like, right, okay. So if women, so it was mainly a female shop, right? Because I guess that's the clothes I wore. So I didn't want to draw trousers maybe at the time. I was like, I just want to draw pretty dresses and shorts and sandals and whatever. So anyway, I was drawing all these female adult clothes, by the way. I wasn't drawing kids' clothes. Oh no, I was like in the market for big spenders, adult, very sophisticated women, actually. I'll show you some of my designs, but very sophisticated, almost like ascot ladies sort of thing. So yeah, very, very fashionable. Anyway, I was designing these things, and then I thought, okay, well, what about if I made a children's line and made a children's clothing line? Then when the mothers come in, they can actually buy outfits for their children as well. So not only are they getting the full package, like the hat, the gloves, the bag, and all that kind of stuff, but they can also buy things for their children. So I started then designing outfits that children would be interested in. And I went down the line of characters like Minnie Mouse and, those kind of characters, and Olive from Popeye and things like that. So don't know why I took that direction, but I thought, okay, the kids that come into the store would want to dress up like Disney characters, right? And not necessarily princesses, but just Disney characters and fun clothes. So that was my first ever business idea that I can at least remember. I didn't actually do anything with it, but in the book, you can see that I've like priced things. I've added accessories, I've added a new clothing line. And then my friends, I went into partnership. Okay. So I think my friend realized what I was doing. And she was like, oh, what are you doing? She's literally my bestest friend at the time. And I was like, well, I've got my own shop. I've got like, but remember, this is just a book shop, right? This is not like, it just lives in my book. It's nowhere else. And she was like, well, I want to design things as well. Like, let's do it together. Let's just say we had some creative differences. Like, we did argue over it. I do remember like us not agreeing on some of the designs. And then I was like, no, that's it. Like, I'm doing it solo. And she was like, fine, I'm going to set up my own shop. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's just become my competitor. So yeah, that was my first encounter with business and pricing things and upselling. And where did that come from, guys? How will I ever know? because like I said, maybe I used to go shopping with my mum and I used to love, the feel of going shopping and wanted to run my own shop. I don't know. But ultimately that business never materialized. I never actually went into fashion or design or, setting up a shop or anything like that. But that's at least the earliest story and memory I have of running a business. So I invite you to consider how and why you are where you are and where that came from. What's the point? I think it's really, really important to understand why we do what we do, because we can actually use that to our advantage. If we know where certain lessons came from, where limiting beliefs came from, we can banish those. If we know where our strengths lie. So for example, clearly I had this natural entrepreneurial spirit to brainstorm ideas and find different solutions and services. And now I can use that to my advantage and use that as my skill in today's business. I also learned from that business encounter that collaborating with people comes with its challenges. So at the time, it didn't end well, but now today I can reflect back and think, okay, with what I've learned, how can I make partnerships more lucrative? How can I make partnerships a win-win situation? So I've become more conscious and more self-aware of what I can and cannot do, how I think, what my limiting beliefs are. If I have a scarcity mindset, I can catch myself and think, right, Rose, okay, just because you're having a quiet month doesn't mean like money has stopped or, your business has flopped. You have peaks and troughs. So I've had to learn through that. But yeah, I wanted to take a trip down memory lane just to see how I actually used to interact with money and how I've come to understand it today. When it comes to, I'll finish off on the point about investing now. So I've spoken about saving, I've spoken about business, but I want to talk about investing. And quite honestly, the only reason I have any investment and any interest in growing money or understanding inheritance and understanding tax laws is because of you. It's because of the people within the financial services industry that I'm surrounded by that are actually educating me and have been educating me about this. Because other than property, property is the number one investment strategy for Italians, okay? It is, I know lots of people love property, but Italians love property because it comes again from that mindset. When we invest in things, financial advisors talk about, what's your why, what's your goal, what's your vision. And Italians' sole purpose, right, the number one reason why they would want to invest in property, you guessed it, if you've guessed it, you've guessed it, is to provide for their children. Their reason for buying so if you had 2 kids, you'd buy 2 houses because you'd leave one each to each child. Okay. And if you had 2 kids, but you couldn't buy 4 houses, you'd buy 2 and then capitalize on that. So the main purpose of buying property from an Italian parent's perspective is because they want to leave property. They want to leave a roof over their children's head. Now, as a financial planner, you'll probably think, oh gosh, there's so many other ways you could do that. There's a trust and so many other ways. But from a tangible perspective, Italians love, seeing the bricks and mortar and thinking, right, these, and then they have so much pride. Like my grandfather did exactly that. He left 2 properties for my mum, 2 properties for my auntie at the time when he passed. And that was his sense of like, I can die happy because my daughter's got a roof over her head and an investment property, and my other daughter's got a roof over her head and an investment property. That for him was like the most strategic and most successful financial plan he could ever have. And so property has always been in our family. We've always been fans of property. So when my parents came into the UK, they bought a little tiny flat that they rented out. We lived at my grandparents' for a short while until they could afford again to buy their own property and live in it. So actually, when they first moved to the UK, they bought an investment property first because my granddad said to my mom, he was like, right, that money's going to depreciate and that house is going to appreciate. So you're going to have to invest it quickly so that you can, get your foot on the ladder, and make that money work faster and harder for you. And then when you can afford, you live with us for a while. So we lived with my grandparents for just like literally maybe a year. And then we bought our own house and moved into it. So yeah, property has always been in our blood. So now that I've been in financial services for about 10 years, now I've started to learn about, other streams of income and other means to invest. So that's where that attitude has come from. So I've always understood property, but obviously since working in financial services, I'm so grateful to all the really elite and professional advisors that I'm surrounded by and friends with that, have taught me to learn, have taught me about, pensions and what happens with my inheritance and things like that. So yeah, I guess my closing comments about this are, number one, take your background or your childhood with a pinch of salt. Do not try and make judgments and don't blame your past for who you are today, because one, you cannot remember it. If you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, how can you remember the lessons you learned when you were 4? You are only remembering a memory from when you were 4. You're only now trying to process what you thought happened. So please take your past and anything that was said, anything that was done with a pinch of salt, because you cannot press replay and you cannot go back to how it was. So I try not to blame or pass judgment or, feel shame for anything that my parents did or anything that I did when I was younger, because I'm not the same person. So that was lesson number one that I wanted to share. Lesson number two is find out if you're a saver or a spender, and find out why. Like, what is your goal? What's your feeling around it? Like, do you want to spend and not save because you feel like you're missing out? Do you want to save and not spend do you want to spend and not save because you feel like you're missing out? Or do you want to save and not spend because you feel like you don't deserve it, right? Do you feel like you just need to keep saving because actually you haven't got the self-control to spend? Maybe you're out of control. So learn about that and see how you can really try and shape your current self into, addressing those limiting beliefs. So yeah, take a look at your past, but with a view to understanding your present and why you do what you do. Yeah, and then my final note is to surround yourself with people who can educate you. So whether it's like property finance brokers or other property investors, or maybe it's a financial advisor. I mean, you should all have a financial advisor on speed dial, as well as a nutritionist or your doctor and your loved ones. So if you only had five speed dials on your phone, 1 doctor or anything health related, 2 money, and 3, the other 3 positions should be given to your loved ones. So definitely surround yourself with people who can banish those limited beliefs, educate you further, and really elevate your money blueprint. Because if you have a low money blueprint, how are you living an abundant life if you're with sick health and in poverty? Like, how is that living in abundance, right? You need love, you need health, you need wealth. So those are my 3 key takeaways for today. If you are enjoying this show, if you're a continued listener, but you actually haven't taken time to maybe connect, please do connect. Like, maybe you're just listening to this show whilst you're on your run. Please remember, when you put your phone down, when you finish your run, when you finish work or whatever, please just remember just a little tap just to subscribe so that you can get notified for the next show and the next speaker that comes on the show. If you found value from this show, please do connect, reach out, send me a DM, or just simply connect on social media. On LinkedIn, you can find me as Rosalia Lazara. On Instagram, I'm also Rosalia Lazara, but I've also got a Manuka Media page on Instagram and TikTok. So please do connect on whatever platform you wish to reach out on. And thank you again for being such an incredible and valued listener. I do really appreciate you tuning in. If you have your own money story that you want to share, either you can come on the show or you can send me a message. Whatever way, please do share. I love hearing your stories. So thank you again. I'm Rosalia. Lovely to have you here with me today. And I'll see you again on the next show.